I grew up in a small town called Stonebridge Estate. Our three-story house wasn't fancy, but it was home. My parents were both teachers at the local school. They made sure my sister Alyssa and I always had what we needed, even though we didn't have much money. They were amazing at making a teacher's salary stretch, and somehow, they always made it work. Alyssa was my older sister, my best friend, and everything I wasn't. While I loved spending time with books and sketching quietly, Alyssa was full of energy and always lit up every room she walked into. I still remember us as kids, climbing the big oak tree in our backyard and pretending we were explorers or princesses. Life was simpler then, before things started to change as we got older. As we grew up, our differences became clearer. Alyssa was outgoing, talented, and seemed perfect in every way. She wrote poems that made our English teacher cry, acted in every school play, and even found time to shine on the rugby team. Meanwhile, I was quiet and preferred spending my lunch breaks in the library instead of with the crowds in the cafeteria. Our parents never showed favoritism. They were just as proud of Alyssa's big achievements as they were of my good grades and smaller accomplishments. But it was clear that Alyssa was destined for bigger things. When college acceptance letters arrived, it wasn't surprising that Alyssa got into Fresno University, one of the best schools in the state. I'll never forget the day her acceptance letter came. Mom and Dad were overjoyed. "Our baby's going to Fresno," Mom cried, hugging Alyssa tightly. Dad was calling relatives to share the news. Alyssa got into Fresno with a full scholarship, he told everyone. That was when our paths truly started to split. We still loved each other, but life took us in different directions. Alyssa moved to the city to start her new life, while I stayed in our hometown, still living in the house we grew up in, trying to figure out my own path. I never expected that my bond with Alyssa would be tested in a way I couldn't imagine. But one golden ring changed everything, breaking what we had built over the years and making me question everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and forgiveness. Alyssa would call home every week, sharing her success stories and achievements. I'd sit at the kitchen table, watching Mom's face light up with pride as Alyssa talked about her latest accomplishment at Fresno. "Did you hear?" Mom would tell everyone. Alyssa's research paper was published in the university's psychology journal, and she's only a sophomore. Dad would add, and she still has a perfect 5.0 GPA while doing all that extra research. That's our girl. Meanwhile, I spent 3 years after high school working at the local diner, saving money for community college. When I finally started at Stonebridge Estate Community College, my parents smiled and said, "That's nice, dear." It wasn't Fresno, but it was something. Alyssa was on TV again yesterday, Mom said during dinner one night. They interviewed her about her research on childhood development. She looked so professional. "That's great," I muttered, barely touching my food. I worked hard at school, but getting an A++ in Intro to Business didn't seem to matter compared to Alyssa's published papers and TV appearances. My achievements felt small, like a candle next to her spotlight. After I graduated, reality hit hard. Alyssa had already landed a job at Preston Medical Center and was becoming a rising star in their psychology department. Meanwhile, I was handing out resumes to local businesses and not getting any calls back. That's how I ended up working at Aunt Kate's store as an assistant administrator. She gave me the job with that familiar look of pity I was getting used to. "It's just temporary," she said, showing me around, "until you find something better for someone with a degree." Then everything changed with one phone call. Alyssa called one Friday evening, her voice full of excitement. "Mom, Dad, I met someone," she said on speakerphone. "His name is Sam, and he's a lawyer at Blackwell and Associates. His family owns half the buildings downtown." I watched as Mom and Dad exchanged looks of approval. Of course, Alyssa would find someone as successful as she was. "He's taking me to Rome next month," Alyssa added. "His family has an apartment there. Can you believe it?" "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom exclaimed, while Dad beamed with pride. I sat there in my old sweatpants, still living in my childhood bedroom and making minimum wage at my aunt's store. The difference between Alyssa and me couldn't have been clearer. Alyssa was a successful psychologist dating a wealthy lawyer, while I was the sister who couldn't seem to get her life on track. "When do we get to meet him?" Mom asked eagerly. Soon, Alyssa said. He's taking me to that new French restaurant this weekend, but maybe next week we can come for dinner. I left the kitchen before they could see the tears in my eyes. It's not that I wasn't happy for Alyssa. I was. But every time she succeeded, it felt like it made my failure stand out even more. Every step forward she took seemed to push me 3 steps back. Holidays became all about Alyssa's exciting life. She'd arrive at our parents' house like a celebrity, full of stories about important clients, big therapy breakthroughs, and glamorous dates with Sam. And then the CEO himself thanked me in front of the entire board, she said over Thanksgiving dinner while I quietly passed the mashed potatoes. Tell them about the conference in Boston, honey, Mom said proudly. I sat there in my work clothes from the store, still living at home, because minimum wage wasn't enough to afford my own apartment. Even with my aunt's employee discount, I couldn't save enough to move out. Then came the announcement we all saw coming. It was during Christmas dinner when Alyssa stood up with Sam next to her, both smiling from ear to ear. We're getting married, she squealed, holding out her hand to show off a stunning gold ring with a sparkling diamond. It's been in my family for generations, Sam explained. My great-grandfather gave it to my great-grandmother in 1923. Mom burst into happy tears. Dad opened his best bottle of wine. I smiled, but inside I felt something heavy settle in my stomach. The next few months were all about wedding preparations. Alyssa was always at the house, turning it into a wedding planning zone. Every surface was covered with bridal magazines, color swatches, and guest lists. One Tuesday in early spring, I had a rare day off. I was lying on my bed, reading my old copy of Pride and Prejudice, when I heard Alyssa and Mom talking in the garden below my window. These roses will be perfect for the reception, Alyssa said. We should plant more along the fence. Be careful with your ring, sweetie, Mom said. Those thorns can catch on it. You're right, Alyssa replied. This glove keeps catching on it. I'll just put it here on the bench for now. I went back to reading my book, only half listening to Mom and Alyssa talking about flowers and table decorations. The afternoon sun felt warm through my window, and I was getting to my favorite part of the story when I heard Mom's voice. We should get more fertilizer if we're planting all these roses. Let's go to the garden center. Good idea, Alyssa said. Kayla, we're heading to the store. Be back soon. I mumbled something in response, too caught up in my book to pay much attention. The house felt quiet after they left, except for the sound of birds outside. When they came back, the calm was broken by Alyssa's panicked voice. Mom. The ring, it's gone. I looked up from my book, startled by the commotion. Through my window, I saw Alyssa and Mom searching frantically around the wooden bench, moving gardening tools and flower pots. It was right here, Alyssa said, her voice rising. I put on the bench. Don't worry, honey. We'll find it, Mom said, though she sounded worried too. It has to be here somewhere. They searched every corner of the garden as the sun started to set, but the ring was nowhere to be found. That's when I first noticed the way they looked up at my window, a flicker of suspicion in their eyes. It felt like a chill in the air. With shaky hands, Alyssa called Sam. His voice came through the phone loud and angry. What do you mean you lost it? He yelled. That ring has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandmother wore it through 2 world wars. I'm so sorry, Alyssa cried. We'll find it. I promise. You'd better find it, Sam snapped. His tone was so sharp, it made me flinch. That ring is irreplaceable. When the call ended, Alyssa turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Angry and accusing. You took it, didn't you? What? I said, stunned. It felt like a slap. Alyssa, I was in my room the whole time. Exactly, she shouted. You were the only one here. Her mascara was running as she screamed. You've always been jealous of me. Mom stepped forward, her face stern. Kayla, if you took the ring, you need to return it right now. I didn't take anything, I said, my voice shaking. I swear. Then you won't mind if we search your room, Dad said, already heading up the stairs. I followed them to my bedroom, feeling helpless as they tore it apart. They went through my drawers, emptied my jewelry box, flipped my mattress, and dumped out my purse. My books were scattered all over the floor, clothes were thrown everywhere, and even my private diary was read, page by page. "It has to be here somewhere," Alyssa muttered, tossing my sweaters onto the floor. The search went on for hours, then days, and eventually a week. Each day, the accusations got worse. "Just admit it," Alyssa cornered me in the kitchen one morning. "We all know you took it because you're jealous. You can't stand that I'm getting married while you can't even get a date. Alyssa, please."
"Look at you," she snapped.
"You're 28, still living with mom and dad, and working a pathetic job that Aunt Kate gave you out of pity. You're a loser, Kayla, and you couldn't stand to see me happy." Mom stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "We're going to call the police if you don't return it." "Go ahead," I shouted, finally snapping. "Call them. I have nothing to hide because I didn't take your precious ring." Each word felt like a knife cutting into me. But the worst part wasn't the accusations or the threats. It was the way they looked at me. They truly believed I was guilty, that I had betrayed my sister out of jealousy. Word spread quickly in our small town. Within days, everyone had heard my parents' version of the story. At the grocery store, neighbors avoided me. At church, people I'd known my whole life suddenly sat in different pews. I was restocking shelves at Aunt Kate's store when I heard her voice behind me. "Kayla." Her tone made me freeze. "We need to talk." In her small office, she didn't even offer me a seat. "Your mother called me this morning," she said. "Aunt Kate, please." She held up her hand. "I gave you a chance when no one else would, and this is how you repay me? By stealing your sister's engagement ring." "I didn't." "Clean out your locker and turn in your keys," she said coldly. "I won't have a thief working in my store." The walk home felt like a death march. I hoped Mom and Dad would see how much this was ruining my life, that they'd realize I could never do something like this. But when I got home, I found them sitting in the kitchen. "Aunt Kate fired me," I said quietly. My voice was barely a whisper. Mom didn't even look up from her coffee. "Pack your things."
"What?"
"You heard your mother," Dad said. "We want you out by tomorrow morning." The room started spinning. "You're kicking me out? Where am I supposed to go?"
I asked.
"Maybe you should have thought about that before stealing from your sister," Mom said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were colder than I'd ever seen them. "You've brought shame to this family, Kayla. I can't even face my friends anymore." "I'm your daughter," I whispered. "No daughter of mine would do what you've done." Her words cut deep, sharp as broken glass. "You have until morning." I stumbled upstairs in a daze, pulling my old gym bag from a closet. How do you pack your entire life into one bag? What parts of yourself do you take? I started with clothes, enough for a week, maybe two. One pair of sensible shoes. My laptop, wrapped in a sweater. Then came the harder choices. The books that had been my friends when I had no one else. Pride and Prejudice, Alyssa Eyre, Little Women. Stories of women who found their way in tough times. Tears wouldn't stop falling. These walls had seen my first steps, heard my first words. This room had been my safe space through every hard moment in my life. Now it was just another place where I wasn't welcome. My phone buzzed with messages from old friends. "I can't believe you'd do this."
"How could you?"
"Don't contact me again." Sitting on my stripped bed, surrounded by the pieces of my life, I realized there was nothing left for me in Stone Ridge Estate. Every bridge was burned, every door closed. Whatever I was going to become, it wouldn't happen here. I had to leave, not just this house, but this town, these memories, and this life that had turned into a prison of blame and distrust. Somewhere out there, I had to believe, was a place where I could start over. A place where no one knew me as the sister who stole the ring, the daughter who betrayed her family, or the girl who wasn't good enough. At 2 a.m., staring at my phone's contact list, I remembered Elizabeth. We'd been close in college before life pulled us in different directions. My hands shook as I dialed her number, hoping she still used it. "Kayla?" Her voice was groggy. "What's wrong?" The whole story spilled out of me between sobs. When I was done, there was a long silence. "I have a spare room," Elizabeth finally said. "I'm in Seattle now. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it." I checked my bank account. $415.22. Just enough for a one-way bus ticket to Washington and maybe a meal or two. When can you come? Elizabeth asked.
Tomorrow, I said.
I have to leave tomorrow, I whispered. The bus ride took 3 days. Most of the time, I just stared out the window, watching the familiar places of my life fade into unknown landscapes. My gym bag sat on my lap, holding everything I owned. It felt like a lifeline. Elizabeth was waiting at the station when I arrived, just like she promised. She hugged me right away, and for the first time in weeks, I felt human again. The store where I work is hiring, she said as we drove to her apartment. It's just retail, but it's something. I started the very next day. The store manager looked at my business degree and my desperate eyes and handed me a name tag. You're on register too, he said. I threw myself into the job like it was my lifeline. Every shift, every sale, every minute felt like one step further away from Stoneridge Estate and the mess I'd left behind. When my coworkers complained about long hours, I stayed late. When they groaned about rude customers, I handled them with a smile. 4 months later, I was promoted to floor supervisor. 3 months after that, assistant manager. By 9 months, I was running my own department. You're different from most people we promote, my district manager said during my review. You're hungry. He was right. I was hungry, not just for success, but to prove myself. To prove that I could be more than what my family thought I was. The day I signed the lease on my first apartment, I finally felt free. It was small, just a studio with a tiny kitchen, but it was mine. No one could tell me to leave. No one could go through my things. No one could question my right to be there. That same day, I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and erased anything that could lead back to Stoneridge Estate. Elizabeth thought I was being extreme, but she didn't argue. They're still your family, she said once carefully. No, I said, unpacking boxes in my new place. Family believes in you.
Family stands by you.
They stopped being my family the day they chose not to believe me. At night, lying in my new bed in my new life, I sometimes wondered about them. Was Alyssa married now? Did Mom still garden? Did Dad still read the paper every morning at the kitchen table? But wondering was dangerous. Wondering led to doubting, and doubting pulled me back to that dark place where I questioned everything, even myself. I focused on work, building a new life, and becoming someone who couldn't be ignored or cast aside. Someone who didn't need anyone's approval. Someone strong enough to survive being erased from her own family story. Even though I tried to move forward, there were nights when curiosity got the best of me. On those nights, I'd ask Elizabeth to check Alyssa's social media on her phone. She got married, Elizabeth told me one evening, scrolling through pictures. Big white dress, church wedding. Your parents look happy in the photos. I nodded, pretending it didn't hurt.
But it felt like a knife in my chest.
A year later, Elizabeth told me she's pregnant. She showed me a photo of Alyssa cradling her belly, Sam's hand resting over hers. She looked radiant. Years passed this way. I built my new life in Seattle while catching glimpses of my old one through Elizabeth's phone. I watched my family's life go on without me. Pictures and posts that never mentioned the daughter who is gone, the sister who is missing. Then one day, everything changed. Elizabeth called me, her voice breathless. Kayla, you need to see this. She sent me a screenshot of Alyssa's latest post. To my sister Kayla, I'm sorry. I was wrong. If anyone knows where she is, please help me find her. I need to make this right. Please share this post. I stared at the words until they blurred.
It's probably some kind of trick, I said.
I don't think so, Elizabeth said softly. Look at the comments. Your parents are there, too. They're begging you to come home. My hands shook as I read their comments. Mom, please come home, sweetheart.
We need to talk to you.
Dad, we made a terrible mistake. Please give us a chance. After 5 years of silence, their words didn't feel real. But there was something genuine in their desperation. I dialed the old house number, half expecting it to be disconnected. Mom answered on the first ring. Hello. Her voice hadn't changed. It's me, I said quietly.
There was a sharp intake of breath, then, Kayla. Oh God, Kayla. I could hear her crying and calling for Dad. Their voices tumbled over each other. Please come home. We need to see you, they said. There's something you need to know. I can come next weekend, I heard myself say. The drive back to Stoneridge Estate was the longest of my life. Each mile brought back memories I had tried to bury. When I arrived, the town looked exactly the same, as if nothing had changed while I'd been gone. Alyssa's car was in the driveway. My heart pounded as I pulled up. I walked up the familiar path to the front door. They were all waiting in the living room. Mom, Dad, and Alyssa. 5 years had changed them, too. Mom's hair was grayer, Dad's seemed smaller, and Alyssa was holding a sleeping little boy, about 5 years old, on her lap. We found it, Mom said, her voice trembling. The ring. We found it. Dad stepped forward. We were replanting the roses last week, and there it was tangled in the roots. Right where I knocked it off the bench that day, Alyssa finished, tears streaming down her face. The ring fell, and then we covered it with soil while planting. It's been there all this time, growing deeper with the roses. The truth hit us all at once, breaking something inside each of us. The living room filled with raw, uncontrollable sobbing. Mom collapsed into Dad's arms, her whole body shaking. Dad's usual calm finally broke, and tears streamed down his face. Alyssa fell to her knees, crying so hard it woke the sleeping boy in her arms. And me? After 5 years of holding it all in, trying to be strong, trying to survive, I finally let go. The tears came in waves, years of pain and loneliness pouring out in deep, gut-wrenching sobs. I'm so sorry, Kayla, Alyssa choked out between gasps. I was horrible to you, cruel, unforgivable. I let my fear and Sam's anger cloud my judgment. I chose to believe the worst about my own sister. Mom reached for my hand but stopped, unsure. We failed you as parents, she whispered through her tears. We should have believed you, protected you. Instead, her voice broke and she couldn't finish. Please, Alyssa pleaded, her voice desperate. Tell us how to make this right. I'll do anything. We all will. I looked at them. These people who had once been my whole world, then became my worst nightmare. And now? Now, I didn't know what they were. I can't just pretend the last 5 years didn't happen, I said, wiping my eyes. You didn't just accuse me. You condemned me. You turned the whole town against me, threw me out with nothing but a gym bag and nowhere to go. What if? Mom hesitated, then continued. What if we saw someone? A family therapist. Someone who could help us rebuild what we broke. Once a month, Dad added quickly, his voice thick with emotion. As long as it takes. I looked at the little boy on the couch. My nephew, I realized. He had Alyssa's nose and Sam's dark hair. 5 years of his life had passed, and I hadn't been there. I'm not moving back to Stoneridge Estate, I said firmly. I have a life in Seattle now, a good job and friends who stood by me when no one else would. We understand, Alyssa said. We don't deserve to have you back in our lives. But if you're willing to try, even just a little. It took me 4 months to agree to visit for the first time. Thanksgiving. I brought Elizabeth with me for support. Dinner was awkward, full of careful conversations and topics no one dared to bring up. But it was a start. Dr. Brianna, our family therapist, helps us talk about the hard stuff. In her office, we talk about trust, betrayal, expectations, and how damaging assumptions can be. Sometimes we leave those sessions angry or hurt, with old wounds reopened. But little by little, we're learning how to listen to each other again. Alyssa's son, Liam, is the easiest part. 5-year-old don't hold grudges or remember the mistakes adults make. To him, I'm just Aunt Kayla, the one who brings him books from Seattle and teaches him to draw. His love is pure and simple, like a bridge connecting who we were to who we might become. The roses still bloom in Mom's garden, even the ones that grew around the ring for 5 years. Sometimes I look at them and think about how truth, like that ring, can get buried under layers of assumptions and blame. But truth, like roses, will eventually find its way to the surface. I'm not the same person who left Stoneridge Estate with nothing but a gym bag and a broken heart.
They're not the same people who cast me out. We're all learning that healing, like tending a garden, takes time, patience, and care. Some days are harder than others, but we keep trying.